So yeah, real quick, I'm Justin Ferguson. I'm the chapter organizer for OWASP Kansas City. And this is our very simple agenda. If you haven't been to one of these before, OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. We're a global organization dedicated to promoting and drawing attention to software security. And we are an open source focused vendor agnostic organization, so we try not to preach about any specific vendor. We promote software security through several means, chapters that exist all across the world, projects, and outreach. So, you know, we do conferences and things like that every year. AppSec EU is coming up, and AppSec USA will be later in the fall. I believe it's in Orlando this year.
Have you gone to those?
I have been to a couple of them. They're good. Yeah, I mean, I get in free because I'm a chapter leader, so that's nice as long as I can just get work to pay for the travel. It works out pretty well. So hint, hint, if anybody wants to be a co-chapter leader, work something out.
All right. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. I have enjoyed them quite a bit. You know, they're a little hit and miss just depending on where they are and what things. And to be frank, the OWASP overall organization is kind of shaky right now. So they're having some organizational issues, but they have a new executive director, and hopefully some of that will get straightened out, and several new board members. So hopefully but they've lost a lot of their sort of day-to-day staff just to having gone elsewhere, and so that's kind of a challenge for them right now. But you know, there are people who had been there for many years, and you know, took another job somewhere else and lost a lot of tribal knowledge. But OWASP, like I said, supports all aspects of and participants of the secure software development lifecycle. We kind of break them down into builders, breakers, and defenders. And our local mission statement is to try to be a welcoming community for web application developers and security professionals to learn, communicate, and share their perspectives at a common table. If you ever have anything you want to reach out to me for, let me know. Our meetings are pretty much every fourth Tuesday here at the Kauffman Foundation. We do move them once in a while if they don't have a room available or something like that, but generally it's a good location, and best of all, it's free. So they're free to attend, but we do greatly appreciate you joining the OWASP Global organization and listing Kansas City as your home chapter, because then we get some money in our coffers and we can use it for something which we should probably think about actually using, because we do have some money to use. So we have multiple ways to find out about us. The mailing list and Twitter are the two most reliable ways to find out what's going on with us. But Facebook, LinkedIn, and the website I try to update at least occasionally. Some upcoming events here in KC. March 7th is ISC Squared, Kansas City. And their topic this month is SSL decryption and inspection. Should be pretty interesting. March 13th is SEC KC, and their topic is intermediate reverse engineering, which should be quite interesting because I know the guy who's giving that talk, and it should be really good. KC Women in Security. That's actually last month's topic. They didn't have a topic listed, and I forgot to delete that line. So, and then our meeting is March 27th. Also in there, I believe March 21st is DevOps KC meetup, which is security focused this month. So that should be interesting. And then a little further out, B-Sides KC. If anybody's interested in going to B-Sides KC, I have a code, free registration code for you. I believe it's just OWASP KC, but I will send it out after the meeting to the mailing list. It's only $20 though, so yeah. And I'm actually speaking, so hopefully. assuming I can get my talk put together in the next 2 months. And then Secure World is May 9th. I don't have any ins for that one. Interface KC, I also have a code for that one, which I will send out to the mailing list. I don't know anything about that conference. The guys reached out to me for the past 3 years, and I have shared out the code, but I don't know if anybody's ever gone. So it seems fairly vendor heavy, but CPEs. So those are kind of the upcoming events. Our speaker tonight is August Johnson, who works for Netsmart Technologies as a security architect, and we'll be talking about OWASP SAMM and software security assurance frameworks, and it should be pretty interesting. At least I think it's going to be interesting. So,
Good stuff.
Wow, that actually worked. I'm even going to take notes.
Oh man, all right. There it is. Cool. Okay, yeah, presentations on the OWASP SAMM. First off, who am I to be telling you about this tool? My title is Security Architect, and I work at Netsmart Technologies. If you guys have or haven't heard of that company, it's kind of in the same rough space as Cerner, healthcare, but IT related to healthcare. They build a lot of software. The company's pretty big, actually. A good fun number is I'm scanning something like 50 or 60 million lines of code right now with some of my tools, and that's quite a few. The company is like one that has grown by acquisition as well. I actually have a little bit about that in my slides, but it makes it so that it's a lot closer to 10 different companies than it is one actual company. But kind of my overall responsibility at Netsmart is to secure our quite vast portfolio of source code that we manage and control and sell to our clients. A little bit of history about me specifically. I've always worked for software companies, or I've always worked very closely with software companies and software developers. I actually worked at a couple of insurance companies. But I've never been a coder myself, but like my undergraduate degree was computer engineering, so like I did a little bit of coding in school. I wrote a little bit of code in a couple of those roles, but I was never like a software developer. So understanding the concepts around the really like deep, in-depth, here's how a software stack works, but not being kind of like pigeonholed in you're a dev, you write code all day. That was kind of how I got to where I am through various different roles. Quality assurance was one of them, and eventually kind of rotating into security. So what is software security assurance? That is really the process around building secure software. When your app has a high level of software security assurance, that means you can kind of assume that the process used to build that app was well thought through and has consistently produced secure software in the past and has a high probability of consistently producing secure software in the future. So and really the goal is protecting the data and resources, of course, but that's really the goal of any sort of security program. One note about the data and resources, this is always something that kind of is forgotten. It's not just the PHI or the credit card numbers, but logs themselves are actually a fairly secure or a sensitive piece of information. And so like protecting those is another layer of that's data and resources that the software controls that security assurance kind of touches and helps to assure has been secured. So really, if you in your role have any influence at all over the software development process, whether that be all the way at the end, you are simply a software user that can write bugs back in the thing, or you're a business analyst who takes requirements from true business people and helps to translate those to developers. Software security assurance can be applied to your role pretty much everywhere inside the software development lifecycle, and even some places kind of outside around governance and strategy. This is a program that can kind of apply. These are the types of things that make CISOs and chief executives smile too, having a strong one or starting to talk this language. So you'll be on their good list pretty quickly. So these are some of the common things that you can kind of compare to the OWASP SAMM. None of them are exactly the same. The scope in some of them is a little bit different. Microsoft's security development lifecycle is one that like just about everybody's heard of. Microsoft worked really hard on building this security development lifecycle 15 years ago, and they gave it to everybody, and it's actually pretty solid. But its scope isn't quite as big as the SAMM's. ISO 27034 might be something that your organization, or NIST 864 if you're like a government or government adjacent. So there are definitely they're not exactly competing models, because as I'll kind of go into, like the BSIMM and the SAMM are very complementary, and they address some of the same things, but you'll see. This was a nice little timeline of just how secure software assurance has kind of gone. The Bill Gates trustworthy computing memo was kind of like a moment in time where it wasn't just software development, it was secure software development, and that like changed, that established the software security industry basically. So that was kind of the beginning of, well, it's the beginning of my arrow here. There's plenty of stuff before that, but that's kind of where I started this. OWASP SAMM started in like 2006, and NIST 864 R2 started about that same time too. That's kind of like the first real big one. The SAMM and the BSIMM, they forked from each other. They're both like an open source project, but they have different goals. And then 27034 initial publish. There's still plenty of pieces that are missing out of 27034 though, so it's like, this was like publish of the introduction of 27034. BSIMM, I didn't put BSIMM 1 through 7 on there because there's like one almost every year. There might be one exactly every year. And then the SAMM 1.5 is the one that I'm working on, but you can actually go out to the GitHub and see there's like stuff in the 2.0 folder. So it's still very much alive, which is great. There's just more and more alternatives kind of forking off, but in that like 2006, 2007 period, that was really when things were starting to expand off of just the Microsoft SDO. So I'm going to quick kind of review of all of them. 27034 is pretty heavy. It's not user friendly. If you have to use 27034, then by all means, it actually is pretty good when you get down into it. But it's not very easy to implement. I think I have this. Oh no, I don't have a nasty screenshot. So that's actually a screenshot of NIST, and that is just so hard to read. Just giant blocks of text like that. Technically, NIST 864 is government only, but one of my previous employers was like a FEHB insurance company, and because they were so like heavily tied to government stuff, they kind of like held themselves to NIST 864, even though it wasn't specifically required. Overall, I'd actually give the content and kind of the way it does things pretty good, although it doesn't really give you like a roadmap to get there. It kind of just says, here's all the things you should do. So in like a heavily regulated industry, especially one that's heavily integrated to the federal government, this is not a bad place to look. If you're like, well, how should we do change control? This is a pretty good place to look. So like here's some of the cool charts in NIST 864. Like these are actually pieces of information that are pretty easily consumed by a lot of different people in an organization. So we're going to develop something, blah, blah, blah. We get down to eventually testing and then lots of control gates. Just, it's like actually pretty nice charts when you get down to it. Microsoft SDL. The scope of the Microsoft SDL is very much just from requirements to release, with these kind of couple of things tacked onto the end. Like you gotta train your guys, and if something bad happens, do that stuff too. It's not as holistic, but the SDL actually, like the type of groups that this applies to really well. Do I have a? No, I don't have a. If you're a like heavily Microsoft shop, and maybe you make like a Windows desktop app or something like that, and you're all in on Microsoft software, especially a smaller organization, they can get a ton of value out of this. It's easily laid out, it's well supported. Microsoft even provides a bunch of tools too, for helping to implement these things, and not like the really expensive ones like they do for creating a sheet of paper. I highly suggest this for many organizations that are using a heavy Microsoft stack and are relatively small development teams. It helps with like no more than 20 developers. Once you get past that, it like starts to be pretty hard to deal with governance and stuff like that. And Microsoft is definitely still very living. It's not a piece, or it's not just sitting out there dead. It's not just like a website that hasn't been updated in years. There's efforts to like put agile development into this and how that fits in the Microsoft SDL. There's definitely good websites out there that help to, like Microsoft written websites that someone at Microsoft is paid to create the content for this. So it's usually pretty good quality.
Yeah, after Microsoft got a certain reputation for their software security, they actually were one of the leaders in fixing a lot of it too.
Oh yeah. I can't remember if I even go into that or not. Yeah, no. But there were some fun stats about Microsoft, how like the difference between like 0 days in SQL 2005 versus SQL 2008 was like a fourfold decrease after they had implemented the Microsoft SDL.
Yeah.
So it was like there were very real ways that the SDL made everyone in the world much more secure. And Microsoft, it's that their attack surface is unequaled pretty much. Okay, the BSIM, Building Security in Maturity Model, is what it stands for. It is definitely related to the SAMM, but it is not a software assurance model. It's really just a big set of survey results. That's kind of I think I've got some more on, yeah. So BSIM just measures real world practices. There's a person that would come to your organization and say, do you do this? Do you do this? And that person is paid for, or maybe they're volunteer or something for the BSIM. And they're professional, and they interview a bunch of different people. And this is the type of output that comes from the BSIM, which is pretty cool. So you can see that cloud organizations, for example, are considerably further along in their maturity than healthcare organizations. Healthcare is like less than a 1.0, cloud is like 1.6. You can see that they're pretty close on compliance. You can see that cloud's pretty mature on configuration management, and healthcare overall has problems. But that's kind of the really great survey results that the BSIMM has. BSIMM totally free, by the way. Go out to the website and explore it and try and map up where your organization fits, because you can kind of compare it to other industries, which is really nice. It has a few helpful concepts and conclusions that you can see after you kind of explore the data a little bit. It's got this concept of an SSG, a software security group, which is an internal group charged with carrying out and facilitating software security. One of the nice metrics they have is the count of people on the software security group compared to the count of developers in the organization, which I would say the vast majority of organizations would be under the average count, or under the count of the organizations that do well with software security. It's basically just more ammo to say your software or your security group is understaffed. And everyone struggles. Like, these are organizations like Amazon that are in this cloud bubble. Like, they're great big organizations here. And I mean, the fact that everybody's under a 1.5 on security testing, and security's hard. That's really what that's saying, is that nobody is knocking this out of the park, especially not any like industry as a whole. So, yeah, here's some fun stats. 67% of organizations provide awareness training. That seems not bad. That actually seems about right in my experience. 40% have an operations inventory of applications. That's better than many places that I've been. 25% identify PII. 21% provide pen testers with all available information, and 11% have a bug bounty program. That's kind of cool. That's better than I expected. Yeah, and that's kind of, there's tons of those all over the BSIMM. Each of these is kind of like a little practice that it measures, and there's like 100 or 200 or something. I don't even know all the numbers, but there are a bunch of those, and then you can explore the data by answered positively or negatively, and then by industry. And like, there's a lot of big orgs that look through the BSIMM too. Like, you'll recognize every company on the list. They're all quite big. So, all right, the SAMM. The goal of the OWASP SAMM is to help organizations formulate and implement a strategy for software security that is tailored for the specific risks facing the organization. So the way this differentiates from the others is that it's there to help build a whole strategy around software security. It's not just like, here's all the crap you should do. Get yourself to level 5 on threat analysis today. It's more of like a stepping stone building block type model, which is great. And it also, it's tailored for the specific risks facing the organization. Like, it's not a you have to do all this type thing either. So this is kind of how it lays everything out. Inside of software development, you have these 4 business functions, and each of those has 3 security practices underneath it. I kind of liked how this was laid out. Everything more or less made sense pretty much immediately. These map directly to the BSIMM's 12 sections too. And so you can actually kind of say that while we think threat assessment is very important, and we're doing that today, only 25% of comparable organizations do threat assessment today. So why? Why do we do that? Why is that different? And that can be like an organizational decision. Or we don't harden our environment. We basically just put Windows XP on there and throw it on the internet. That's a business decision. Maybe that's what you want to do. Those are the types of things that they can line up really easily. The BSIMM and the SAMM are super complementary around those two. So I'm actually going to go through each of these, but kind of quickly, around what's in detail, and maybe I'll see if I can come up with some good stories about how all this crap is shaken out. So governance is really the high level. You've got the 3 pieces, like a strategy, and that one's kind of like meta too. Like a lot of the metrics and strategy and metrics are like, you have built a secure software assurance program and told people about it. So it's like, okay, I stayed there and email complete. Policy and compliance is one that, assuming your organization is big enough to have to deal with policy and compliance stuff, they're probably already knocking a lot of these out of the park, which is nice, because they have to, or they get big ass fines. Education and guidance is, it's just education, but it's not just for developers, it's for all kinds of people. I mean, the sysadmins you've got working on the different hosts in your network, there's education that they can gain. Construction, that's where the software is not even built, it's like defined in the construction side of things. So understanding whether your threat is a user of your software over prescribing a patient, or whether your threat is the Russian mob trying to put Bitcoins on your servers or take them off or something, use JavaScript to mine them. Security requirements is something that organizations have a tough time doing because it's not intuitive that you have to define how an application should behave when it's being attacked. This kind of goes through a good process for helping to define that. And then secure architecture is, it's really build secure software by default. That when new software is created, like when a new page in your app is being spun up, that page gets authentication. It always, it must have authentication unless it's explicitly denied, and like the developer has to do work to explicitly deny that page from authentication. Like that's the right way to architect an application. And there's tons of examples of that, but the SAMM isn't about like giving you those examples. It's about making sure you've thought about that and that you have a consistent process to think about it, and that your developers know where to look when they're like, oh, I need a new graphing library on JavaScript. Let me just pull one off of the internet. That's not where they go first. They go to like some inventory of apps. They reuse one that's existing. They keep it up to date. Those types of things. Verification is really about once you know how you're going to solve the problem with code, try and make sure that's the right solution. Design review is kind of the architecture level stuff. Implementation review is really, it's code review. It's looking through lines of source code, more or less. But static application tools kind of fall under that too. And then security testing is, it's both QA and tools like a web application scanner, for example, or like fuzzing even, kind of get into security testing. And operations is really how it's run. Issue management is like incident management, pretty much. And I've been trying to figure out a way to put like logging and monitoring in this, because logging and monitoring is something that we're working pretty hard on right now. We're spending a lot of resources. And it doesn't exactly fit except for in issue management. But then I kind of realized that logging and monitoring is like a whole organization thing. It's like a networking thing, not a building secure software thing. And so it's like slightly outside of the scope of what the SAMM is supposed to do. But it tees into issue management where it does. It's that you understand when things are not working for your app. You have a process when your app is blowing up. When you think SQL injection's happening to your app, you know who to call, basically. Environment hardening is really just patching, monitoring those hosts for staying in compliance. Then operational enablement is one that's kind of subtle too. That's that the developers, those who actually build the application, communicate the ways that the application should be used to the end users. Now, in many organizations, those are people that are sitting literally right next to each other, but in some they're not. And some you have clients actually install that software on site, and that makes things a little extra complicated. But yeah, it's just really the communication between those who design the security controls of the software and the actual app running in its real environment. Oh, like a code signing is another thing that's like in the operational enablement thing. It's that this verifies that this is secure code, but that's like a level 3 maturity level thing. It's like kind of hard to get to code signing. So kind of a deep dive, so you guys understand what, I'm not doing this for all of them, I do this for a few of the different security practices though. So education and guidance, really at maturity level 1, it's that there are resources offered to development staff around secure programming. That like they understand that, hey, here's where I should go to take a course on secure programming. We have some exercises, or somebody stands up the OWASP. What's the thing you like hack?
There's 2 or 3 of them. There's WebGoat, there's Juice Shop.
Yeah. So like having one of those up there and then kind of promoting, hey, hack this app, whoever gets the highest score gets a freaking $50 gift card or something. It's taxed, which sucks, gift cards. But yeah, that's what it is. Then the EG2 activities, the kind of level 2, is that you have different training for just kind of the guys who just fix bugs all day versus like the real architects of the app, or different training for the guys who help run the software in your data center. Different training for maybe business analysts even who help to ask those security questions for the clients. But those trainings are very distinct in how security kind of interacts with their roles. But that's really what level 2 is. And then there's this concept of security coaches too, where maybe you have one guy on a team of 10. That guy is the guy who's had a bunch of extra security training. He loves security. He can take you through how AES 256 actually works all the way down. And he's a badass, but he's a coder all day long. Those are security coaches, and they would have specific responsibilities with EG2 of making sure they share that knowledge, making sure that in the context of what you're actually working on, you understand the security implications. And then EG3, I guess I put the results. So each of these is like a different thing that the SAMM offers. For EG1, there is an objective, there's also activities, and there's also results, and there's a few other things too. I kind of just pulled little pieces out of each of the like sections of education and guidance. Show that, but by the time you've got your EG3, you should assume you're going to get efficient remediation of vulnerabilities in both ongoing and legacy code bases. That's just kind of the result of having that. Oh yeah, Education Guidance 3 also talks about examination, where you would say, Justin, you failed your test. You are not a certified secure developer for our organization. And you'll be like, okay, I'll study it. Take it again. You are now certified as a whatever secure certified developer. That's the type of thing. There's some sort of way to prove it. Implementation review, yeah, this is pretty much just code review. It's not exactly the same. It can't just be like, oh, I do code reviews, so I'm good on this one. It's a little bit different because it's more in depth. So like level 1 is that the developers, they have multiple eyes look at high risk code. Like your authentication logic is changing, you get multiple eyes on that change. Like every time before it hits prod, you confirm that multiple eyes looked at that and signed off on it. Another tool that this talks about is like code review checklists. And the types of checklists they're pretty simple. It's like always validate user input. I mean, it's just the basic things that as a coder and as people that are familiar with OWASP, you guys could write off the top of your head. But like level 2 gets into automated code analysis, SAST tools, things like that, which are pretty helpful. And it really eventually gets to the point where it's like enforced, that say all code is reviewed by at least 2 people, or all changes are reviewed by at least 2 people. You audit the code for unreviewed stuff. You have tools that automatically scan for anything, and your code won't even get pushed out to even the dev environment if there's like security vulnerabilities found. That's the type of a mature implementation review process. That's what it looks like. And it has objective goals for code level security, like 0 high vulnerabilities according to this SAST tool, that type of thing. And environment hardening, that's the one that you kind of start off with actually having documentation on how the software is supposed to run, occasionally difficult, and how the OS underneath the software is supposed to run and be managed. The second level is really about monitoring. This is something that probably SCCM or something like that in your guys' organization is doing today, where SCCM understands that that system is missing a patch, and that it checks in and misses that patch and then tries to push it out to it. Those are the types of problems that environment hardening tries to deal with. This is technically still in the concept of like where your software is run, but these are the types of things that you're probably going to tag on to, like what your org does anyways, just for your laptop. Those processes for your laptops are probably already pretty mature, and so you just need to kind of tie into them for this. And really the last level of environment hardening is things like protection tools, like maybe a web application firewall would apply there, depending on exactly how you do it. Honeypots, that's the type of thing that environment hardening you'd get to in level 3. So that being said, what is the SAMM? In the end, it's just a great big PDF. It's great. It is a fantastic PDF. It takes forever to load on my machine, but there's so much great content in there that I have the thing open almost every day on kind of guiding where we should be, what we're aiming for this particular little section of the security assurance program. There is a wiki, which is a little bit faster. It's just on the OWASP page. The wiki is pretty good. It does only have about 85% of the content of the PDF, so it's missing a few pieces here and there. But overall, it's pretty good. If you're searching for enterprise hardening level 2, what the shit should I be trying to work on right now? The wiki is usually pretty good for that. And then there is SAMM_assessment_toolbox XLS. That actually was created by a local, Nick Koblenz. He put together all that stuff. So they're like, this is, even though this is a worldwide OWASP, big deal, mature product, like local guys have contributed to it. That's kind of just a call to get involved in the open source community, hop onto an OWASP project. So like that was very useful for me when I was doing the interviews. And I didn't even realize that Nick had put that together until I like eventually looked at like the first page of an Excel document that you usually skip over, and I'm like trying to get to work here. It's like, cool. So how do you get started? Self-assessment. See where the hell you are today. Maybe you're pretty good. Maybe you're all screwed up. In my experience, it was not as bad as I had feared, but not great. That questionnaire, that XLS document is a good place to start. These are what the questions look like. I'm sure it's pretty difficult to read, but it says, have the developers been given high-level security awareness training? And then the answers, it's like, yeah, we did it once, or yeah, we did it this year, or we constantly do this. Every developer's had this, we're good to go. And so it kind of rates you like a 0.3 is what the combination of these two get you. Because both of these are kind of weak answers, and so you can't get the full education and guidance level 1 rating. Then you kind of come up with this nice big screen that looks like this, where you say, oh, hey, look, for policy and compliance, we're doing practices that are already in maturity level 3, but we're only doing half of them. And we're not even getting everything in maturity level 1 done, so maybe we should focus on some of the bread and butter, the basic stuff, and get us done there before we start doing the exotic compliance stuff. And then, shit, we haven't done a thing in design analysis. We've barely done a thing in threat assessment, but our management is looking not bad. It probably wouldn't be a big lift to get these up to 1 and maybe even 2 as a whole business function. So it's good to be able to make some observations like that. And now, not all of these should even be weighed equally in your organization. They're kind of like falsely weighed equally on a screen like this. Maybe it is that you only need policy and compliance and security requirements and some operation stuff. But maybe not, and this gives you more information than you had for sure. So this is kind of a prove it moment where you're like, okay, these guys told me that they do patching and everything's good, let me check. And that is also the exact same thing that you're going to do after each phase of the SAMM that you implement. You're basically going to say, okay, we changed. We implemented all these great new processes. Now let me check. It's kind of like a self-audit. And then your roadmap. These are 3 of the practices in the roadmap and 4 phases. So you can see that like right at the beginning, you start at education and guidance, maturity level 1, because you do developer training yearly. It's like clockwork. Everything's great. But everything else you start at 0, and you're like, okay, I need to get governance up to speed way faster than I need threat assessment, and I mean there's like 10 more after this, but so you can see phase 1, you ramp up strategy and metrics, and you ramp up policy and compliance to level 1. You're good to go. And then you keep pushing on policy and compliance all the way up to level 3 by phase 3, but you kind of skip that for strategy and metrics. I mean, you just keep level. So that's like the maturity level that you're building over time. And you can see that like threat assessment, you just don't ever really need to get to 3 maybe in your particular org. That's really where the SAMM is different than the other ones, like the NIST 800. It doesn't say you have to get to this level. In fact, it kind of says change this so that it should be at the level that fits your organization. So like a small, agile organization with key pieces in place, you might want to pick really short phases, like 2-month or even 3-month, but that's in like small shops, like 15, 20 devs max. Everybody's on the same page, everybody's smart, security's going to be a focus, and everybody's ready to implement new processes and new tools. Those are the types of things that in that type of organization you can move fast, you can implement a lot of things all at once. Or in a monolithic, resistant to change organization, some of these things get a little bit harder. But likely in those organizations, you probably have a few of them, like compliance. Pretty much every nasty, old, crusty IT shop that I've worked on, they got their compliance stuff worked out because they're a big insurance provider or bank or something like that. They know their way around these things. They already have them built in. Or a heavily remote organization, lots of different technology stacks and siloed teams. That's kind of where I'm working. It's a nightmare. That's probably the best description of how it works there. So it's very difficult to implement various things there. But I have some guidance to go on where that's way better than nothing. I like that 100% security badge. We have those like hanging up in our cubes. Everything's 100% secure. So setting the metrics that you actually want to measure yourself against, the SAMM kind of offers some example metrics, but some of the struggles that I've run into, defining people and groups of people is kind of hard. Like, who's a developer? Therefore, who needs that training? Like, do the managers of developers need the training too? Because sometimes they write code, sometimes they don't. There's people that have developer in their title that don't write code. All the lines are kind of blurring here. And really making them testable and gatherable is an art. Pick your metrics really well. Be willing to adjust them too. Make sure everybody's on the same page when you do. And then early on, for your phase one of an organization, when you're just trying to hit some of these low numbers, you just do phase one for education and guidance. And let's say you 50% of devs get training this year. For phase three, let's say you're still doing that particular practice, but that's like a phase one thing. That's like a security practice one. You just up that number to 75. And even though it's the same thing that you're measuring, you just change the number for a phase down the road. Yeah, so pick your phase length. That's kind of what I was saying, is in the bigger, more complicated organizations, longer ones usually work a little better. And for the smaller ones where like everybody's in the same room and you can be like, hey guys, we're doing the same thing. I think what that means is you guys are going to have to use a couple new tools, have a couple more processes. We're going to get some more output, and we're going to do code reviews. And they'll be like, okay, sounds great. That means you need a short phase length if that conversation can happen like that. If that conversation is going to take 2 months to even communicate to all the people that need to communicate it to, then that's longer phase length. Pick your end goals, but certainly be willing to tweak it at any time. I'm well into phase 2 of a planned 4-phase process, and it is very different from what I had imagined already. But we've made some good progress. So that's one of the things is that, like, I knew the metrics when I initially picked them were going to be kind of tough. They were tougher than I thought, and even the ones I've been picking for phase 2 and looking at for phase 3 are still tough. Like, that's the piece that you got to have something really clearly measurable. That's been my struggle, is having a really good metric that feels like you do execute this maturity level. That I am now a moderately mature organization in policy and compliance. How to measure that is actually kind of tough. Like, that's the key question in this whole thing. Okay, so you did it. You completely executed your whole roadmap. It's really just like, at that point, you keep up with your metrics. 100% of devs get one-on-one training from drunk Steve Ballmer all day. So yeah, there's always a way to, like, completely up your metrics, get everybody more secure. You're never really going to finish this. So it's really like you get to a certain maturity level and you've created all these processes that you have to deal with anyways, that you're not going to be like out of work. Okay, so like observations so far. Overall, the SAMM is really easy to use and really easy to get great output like this. So this is like this star map where it's like phase 1, you get this level of maturity on some of these, and then phase 2, you get this level. Phase 3, you kind of get this big yellow blob. 4, you get the blue blob, and then by the time phase 5 is complete, you are now a very mature organization in all of these things, and some of them you're only level 2, but it's cool to kind of like see the growth of your maturity. It's easy to make all these, and then like I threw together this nice little Word document that made all this stuff look pretty nice. And like here's some of the success metrics. Like you're going to have a compliance discovery event. Just check that box when it's done. So it's really easy to get very high quality stuff out of this that's like exec level presentable across all kinds of different disciplines in the organization. I would suggest, there's lots of pieces of this that security doesn't have a ton of influence over too, depending on your organization. And so like begging and pleading for favors or getting executives on board, or buying teams lunch. Like those are the types of things you kind of have to resort to meet some of these metrics. Because like these are not things that the guy on the security team is going to write the documentation for how the software works and then deliver that to the guys who are going to run it and make them read it. Like you can't take all that on. It's just it's impossible. So getting started, I'd actually suggest, as much as this presentation has been around the OWASP SAMM, the BSIMM is an easier place to get your feet wet. It's something that you can you read the PDF, and you're like, oh shit, there's like these 10 things in here that are awesome. You copy and paste those out, send them in an email out to your team, and everybody's like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. Send a link to the BSIMM. It's a great place to get started on just thinking about these whole things in the context of your organization. But then once you kind of get a little momentum around that, start to check out the SAMM because it shows you how to get from where you are to where you want to be so well, and that's really the value of the 80-page PDF. And that's pretty much it. Feel free to contact me if you want, and that's it.
Have you looked at the OWASP ASBS?
I am aware that it exists.
Okay.
I have copied and pasted some crap out of there in the past because it is pretty useful, but I haven't gone in depth on it.
Yeah,
in the recent
I've
past.
just been trying to figure out how it compares to the SAMM. You know, when one would use one versus the other, and it's really hazy as far as when.
So the way I understand the ASBS is it's basically like a giant collection of security requirements for software, right?
Yeah.
So I really see that as flowing into the security requirements portion of this.
Okay.
It's just a
component.
It's a giant source of content for your overall your security requirements process. It's certainly really useful. And those are very well written requirements too. But maybe you don't even care about maybe you don't care about some of them because you're not PCI. It's just not a PCI thing, and so you don't have to deal with your sectioned off. Yes, certainly complementary. The SAMM is kind of a framework on how to apply those rather than a kind of competing thing.
That makes sense.
Like the SAMM will never say your apps need to have encrypted passwords or hashed passwords. That's not something that the SAMM could ever it doesn't care about that. Your app might not have a password. So it talks about just considering, I don't even know what it would talk about in security requirements. It just says you have considered security throughout various different phases. Okay. You have people checking your code to make sure it's secure. You understand what compliance requirements apply to your code.
Yeah.
And you have talked about the threats to your code. So at that point, then you're like, oh crap, well I should probably hash those passwords because the threat to my code is my freaking DB gets dumped by bad guys. So, yeah.
All right.
Any other questions?
Just a lot of things to look up after this.
Yeah. No, and this is also something as much as I like tools and in-depth technical stuff, I love this process stuff. I really do. It's so great. That's how secure software gets built. Is these big, funky processes where you've got a bunch of different people doing a bunch of different things, and they're all trying to work towards one clear goal, and they have great resources to do so. And the SAMM is really a great tool on how to get there. And it gives some organization and some great visualization around exactly how to do that. So, yeah, apply it to your organization. Seriously, the SAMM it's a great tool. And in my organization too, we've got a little OWASP SAMM portal. I call it the Netsmart Secure Software Assurance Program, so it's the SSAP. But we've got a little tracker that shows like where we are on this, like what stuff we've got and failed, and that's just like it's a crappy Excel sheet. But it looks pretty good, and it'd be easy to send out to an exec and say, hey, we knocked this out, this is great. And overall, like when somebody's like, okay, we need to implement a WAF because WAFs are hot right now and F5 is giving us a great price. And you're like, well, actually, we should probably patch our shit first because that's a little bit more important on the overall maturity level of how you protect your software. So those are the types of conversations that are a little bit easier to have when, and like the implementation review is a good one. Like implementation review level 2 is really like a bunch of automated tools, and automated tools are great. Do not get me wrong about that. Looking at static code analysis is awesome, but if you're not doing code reviews in the first place, it's why would you think that anybody's even going to look at the output of the automated tool? If nobody really cares about the software that's going through, then and code reviews like per hour spent are almost certainly more valuable too than even the automated tools. They're super great. Code reviews are really, really helpful. So get your devs to do those, and then you'll be maturity level 1. Then you can apply some of the automated tools to your builds and build it up from there. Well, thanks a bunch, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you making the time to.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I like to share this stuff.